Okay. Good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this bonus webinar for the 3 tests of a winning sales message. After having gone through the 3 tests, I found that there was something else we needed to cover, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So a lot of the content you're going to be seeing comes from the Story War Academy and from my real world sales experiences with my clients and myself. So let me ask you, when we sent the invitation out, I asked you all this question. Are you the owl or the peacock? You probably wondered, what is he talking about? Well, look at the owl. The owl is so well camouflaged, you can barely even see that he's there. But the white male peacock, he signals, he stands out. He stands out like nothing else. And what we find sometimes is when it comes to our sales message, especially our winning sales message, we go all the trouble to come up with a killer winning sales message, and then we camouflage it. And we'll talk about what causes this camouflage in just a minute. But as I was researching for this webinar, I came across a very interesting video about cephalopods. Those are the squids and things like the cuttlefish. And I'm amazed at what they can do. As we watch this short clip, see what lessons you think we have as it relates to winning sales messages. Probably a couple on the positive and the negative side.
You may have seen some of this before, but we're behind a coral reef, and there's this rock out there, a lot of sand, fishes swimming around, and all of a sudden this octopus appears. And now it flashes white, inks in my face, and jets away. In slow motion reverse, you see the ring develop around the eye, and then the pattern develops in the skin. And now watch the 3D texture of the skin change to really create this beautiful 3D camouflage. Decision-making is one of the things that this brain has to do, and it does a very good job of it. Shown here, you see this octopus perambulating along, and then it suddenly stops and creates that perfect camouflage. We can test this camouflage like that cuttlefish you see behind me, where we pull the rug out from under it and give it a checkerboard. And it even uses that strange visual information and does its best to match the pattern with a little ad-libbing. I talked about those skin bumps, the papillae. Here's the giant Australian cuttlefish, and it's got smooth skin and a conspicuous pattern. And I took 5 pictures in a row, 1 second apart, and just watched this animal morph. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now I'm a seaweed. And then we can come right back out of it to see the smooth skin and the conspicuousness.
Isn't that amazing that an animal can have that level of camouflage? So what's the lesson for us? Well, are we camouflaged? So that's one lesson. I think part of another lesson might be adapting so well to the environment that you just blend in. And ultimately, that's the sign of great messaging, is you blend in right with the client. So over the last few weeks, we've been talking about the 3 tests of a winning sales message. And you'll remember, you can probably say them ad nauseum. First, it's got to be important or emotional to the buyer. It has to be different from the competition, and it has to be credible and sticky. And why is this important to us? It's important because it means that we can have bigger deals, faster deals, in less time, and you're going to be able to do repeat business. You're going to be able to upsell, and that all important cross-selling. And in the B2B world, once you put all that time and energy into investing into a client relationship, you don't want to start all over again. So being able to cross-sell and upsell is ultimately important. But there's one thing that we didn't really call out specifically that permeates all 3 of these tests, and that is this element of contrast. Contrast. Okay, what is contrast? Well, let's talk about the opposite. Camouflage. Camouflage is blending in, making yourself invisible to your buyer. And how do we do that? We typically do that by giving too much information, by Me Too messaging. It's amazing when I'll work with clients and we'll do one particular analysis, and I'll say, okay, what are all the words and messages that your competitor uses? And they put them on a whiteboard or a mural board. And then I say, what are your messages? And invariably, they're the same thing. So Me Too messaging. Another thing that we see a lot is no comparison of life without your product and life with your product. So contrast is very different. Contrast is being able to take the specific difference between two or more solutions. And it's being able to recognize what the value is. We'll get into this a little bit later, but once you understand that difference between the two, that's value. It's very simple. And it's also very fast and easy for your buyer to understand. And it's also easy for them to retail to other stakeholders. And you know, in the B2B world, you typically have multiple stakeholders, and what works for one may not work for another. So you got to be able to signal and stand out from everything else, have something that's easy to retail. All right. So let's say, here's a great example. It's a 30-second commercial. It's a candy bar. Now, if I asked you, describe your life without this candy bar, and then describe your life with the candy bar, this is an excellent version of contrast.
Can we turn the AC up? I'm dying back here.
It's on. Can't you feel it?
Can you feel that?
Oh.
Jeff, eat a Snickers, please.
Why?
Every time you get hungry, you turn into a diva. Just eat it so we can all coexist.
Turn into a diva.
Put it in your system. Great advance.
Okay.
Thank you. Better? Better.
Will you get your knees out of the back of my seat?
You're not you when you're hungry. Snickers satisfies.
I love that one. Okay, here's another example. This one goes back about 18 years, and you may say, this guy really likes Steve Jobs. I do. There's a lot of things I respect about Steve Jobs. He's probably one of the finest business communicators. Now, this situation was in January 2005. Apple had been using the PowerPC chip, and it just wasn't taking them. So they had to switch over and go to the Intel chip. So he's talking to a group of developers. So it could be a very technical discussion, but watch how clearly he contrasts both with left and right, and then watch what he does with his body. He also does this very well with his body.
So it's time for a third transition, and yes, it's true. We are going to begin the transition from the PowerPC to Intel processors, and we are going to begin it for you now and for our customers next year.
Left and right.
Now, why are we going to do this? Right? Didn't we just get through going from OS 9 to OS 10? Isn't the business great right now? Why do we want another transition? Because we want to be making the best computers for our customer looking forward. Now, I stood up here 2 years ago in front of you, and I promised you this. And we haven't been able to deliver that to you yet.
Life without.
I think a lot of you would like a G5 in your PowerBook, and we haven't been able to deliver that to you yet. But these aren't even the most important reasons. The most important reasons are that as we look ahead, though we have great products right now, and we've got some great PowerPC products still yet to come.
Check out how simple his visuals are.
As we look ahead, we can envision some amazing products we want to build for you, and we don't know how to build them with the future PowerPC roadmap. And that's why we're going to do this.
Yeah,
when we look at
on the
Intel,
screen.
They've got great performance, yes, but they've got something else that's very important to us. Just as important as performance is power consumption. And the way we look at it is performance per watt. For 1 watt of power, how much performance do you get? And when we look at the future roadmaps projected out mid-2006 and beyond, what we see is the PowerPC gives us sort of 15 units of performance per watt. But the Intel roadmap in the future gives us 70. And so this tells us what we have to do.
So you saw how he used left and right, the contrast, and what they could do without, what they could do with it. And he uses a technique that we'll talk about later on, months down the road, called anchoring, where he assigns value. You can see everything that was on the left-hand side of the screen was old. It was PowerPC, it was the bad stuff. And everything on the right-hand side was new. And he even adjusted where he stood. Whenever he wanted to talk about the good side, he typically went to that right side. That's anchoring. That's nonverbal communication. That's an art. Okay, so let's now discuss what is value, what is contrast, what's the relationship between contrast and value. This is probably the simplest example I can come up with. Another principle of the Story War Academy is that value is the difference between the pain and the gain. It's a measurement of distance, and you must have at least 2 points to show difference, or in other words, contrast. Let me illustrate this for you. In front of me, I have a continuum from pain all the way to joy. And over here on the far left, I have a woman laying in a fetal position with a mind-splitting headache. She's holding her eyes, they're closed. She's really hurting. She's in a lot of pain. Here, I've got somebody with a mild headache. She knows that she's losing some brain cycles to the headache pain, but all in all, she's not as bad as the first person. Here, we've got somebody who's feeling fine right now, but they're prone to the occasional headache. And then over here, you've got a woman on her honeymoon. She's never had a headache, and she doesn't foresee ever getting a headache. Okay? So now I've got a unopened jar of Tylenol, proven pain relief for migraine headaches. Which of these 4 is going to pay the most for the Tylenol? Yeah, this one right here. Why? Because she's in the most pain. She has the farthest to go. Where she wants to be is 6 feet from here. This person right here doesn't have as far to go. How much will this person pay for the Tylenol? She'll pay a lot. Have you ever been in a position, maybe in an airport or while you were traveling, where you needed some Tylenol and you went and bought some at the hotel or the airport, and it was incredibly priced, but you were more than happy to pay it because you really needed it? All right, so you see where I'm going, okay? How much would this person pay for it? Not as much as this one, right? How about this one? She's not going to pay as much as that one. It's going to be even less. How about the woman on her honeymoon? She's probably not even going to look at it. Why? Because we know her headaches are going to be coming later, right? Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at this thing right here. Years ago, I had a mentor that taught me about the primal brain. And this is neuromarketing. And so as you look at the brain, there's this basal part of the brain that makes decisions, and it makes the decisions on the fly. And it's the most important part of the brain that we need to sell to. And there are 6 things that appeal to this part of the brain. 6 things. And I won't go over all 6, but just notice that and it also nails the heart. We've talked about a lot of these already, but the 6th thing is contrast. 6th thing is contrast. So contrast goes to our survival. All right. So now let's look at, what does a message sound like when it has contrast in it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some examples from different industries that I've worked with, and of a message that is non-contrast, and then a message that is contrast. And we'll use different colors to contrast it. Okay? Value should always paint 2 contrasting pictures. First, your buyer's life without your solution. Let's simply call it pain. And second, your buyer's life with your solution. Let's call that one gain, pain and gain. And the greater the distance between them, the greater the value. Let me give you a few examples from different industries. Let's say you sell data analytics. It's one thing to say you'll get a fast answer with our solution, but it's more compelling to say your answer will be 5 times faster with our solution. If you sell safety valves, it's one thing to say you'll have a reliable safety valve, but it's more compelling to say you'll have the only safety valve with 0 incidents under high pressure, where all the other safety valves blew out. If you sell HR outsourcing, it's one thing to say you'll have freedom to focus on your core work, But it's more compelling to say, rather than being controlled by daily tasks, you'll have the freedom to focus on your core work since you've given us your chore work. All right. I hope you can see the difference between having a good message and then having a message that shows contrast, something that compares. If you look at any good communicator, any great leader, go back and analyze any of their speeches, and you will see high levels of contrast. Years ago, I was studying Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. And if you just take a red pen, and what color do you like for positive, green or blue? And if you just highlight all the things that are negative in the speech and then highlight all the things that are positive in another color, you'll find some very interesting things. And so great leaders, great persuaders understand the importance of going back and forth with this contrast. Some of you may be saying, Kevin, you're cheating. We've already talked about this. We've talked about differentiate or die. Why are you going back at this and giving it a new name? Well, I'm glad you recognize that they're very similar. However, differentiation is not the same as contrast. Differentiation is when you know that a difference exists. There's something different. Contrast, on the other hand, is when you know exactly what that difference is, and especially when it revolves around the life of your buyer. What is your buyer's life like with your product, and what is it like without your product? And typically without your product, it's with the competitor or the closest competitor. So of course I want you to differentiate, but I want you to contrast, compare and contrast against the next greatest alternatives. Okay, now we briefly introduce you to the arrowhead. Okay, so what I want you to think about when you think about the arrowhead is your best message in 30 seconds. Okay. Let me share an example with you. And this is something I learned years ago after I'd come up with the arrowhead. I realized I was missing something. So this was the lesson that we came away with. So this is a sample arrowhead. In the arrowheads we've created so far, we've only painted one of these pictures, what we would call the gain arrowhead. But to make your arrowhead truly compelling, we must also paint the pain arrowhead and contrast the two. Let me give you a couple real-world examples. All right, here's an arrowhead you've seen before. You'll remember this is the global technology company, the oil and gas company that works with large offshore rigs, helping them optimize their production, profit, and safety. You'll remember their hero is a gentleman named Leighton. He's an offshore oil rig manager. What Leighton wants to do is he wants to make certain he's protecting against an offshore oil accident. However, the best safety valves are also very expensive. This is what Leighton looks like. Now, as if I'm talking to Leighton. Leighton, I hear what you're saying. You're concerned that right now you're going to be left with a cheap but very risky safety valve. Ouch. One that's never been tested under high pressure that will leave your community and your environment at a great deal of risk. And it comes from a foreign supplier of cheap valves.
Okay, watch the pivot.
What if you could have reliability when it really matters with a safety valve that's been certified for the highest pressures out there? And what if you could have the best protection for your community and your environment from a partner that will support you both globally and locally? All right, so as you look at the 3 tests of a winning sales message, you know it's got to be important, different, and credible. And we've talked about benefits, features, and proof points. So when you think about contrast, I want you to think about contrast when you discuss benefits. If you've got a benefit you're going to talk to the customer about, why is your benefit better than the next greatest alternative? Even if it's ever so small, find that contrast and ask them what it means to them. Same thing is true with the feature. If you have a feature, then find out how is your feature different. In the oil and gas space, they do this thing called wire line. They have these 5,000 foot long spools of wire wrapped in insulation. And a lot of times what happens is as this wire is extruded, sometimes it gets a little wider or narrower. And whenever that happens, it can throw off things in the oil well very bad. And so what most companies that make this wire line is they will do a quality check on the first foot and the last foot, and then they'll assume everything is in the middle. But a client I had a process that checked it every inch. Now imagine how that differentiating feature gave them the bragging rights to talk about more reliability and greater quality, okay? Now, in your evidence and your proof points, you also want to contrast. So find out, how would we prove it with the others? How would we prove it with ours? And sometimes you may be dealing with a new product where you don't have reliable proof points, and you may be working with a proof of concept. Those are critical. Metaphors come into a big benefit there when you do stuff like that. So always be looking for contrast and how you're going to do it. All right, let's take a look at one more video. Snickers, okay? Life without Snickers, life with Snickers. Snickers is my favorite candy bar.
Mike, what is your deal, man?
Oh, come on, man. You've been riding me all day.
Mike, you're playing like Betty White out there.
That's not what your girlfriend said.
Baby.
Whoa.
That's not cool. Eat a Snickers. Better?
Better.
I'm all bet!
That hurt.
You're not you when you're hungry. Snickers satisfies.
I think they're the ones that came up with the term hangry. And great marketing there and showing contrast. Okay, so when you provide contrast, what does that do for your buyer? Here's a short clip from the Story War Academy. Imagine what it does for your buyer when they hear the contrast of their life without your solution and their life with your solution. Think how much easier it is for their decision to buy when they see the value so clearly. Yep. When they can see it so clearly, it's a no-brainer why they should buy your product. And then they become your salespeople and they help sell your product. That's how you win in B2B sales, with a message that is not just viral, but meaningful and easy to be retold. Okay, so let's take a look at our next steps for this work session. Okay, next week, we're going to start getting into sticky. Remember, I told you we were going to hold off on this one until mid-November and December. You will love sticky. Sticky means you can come up with a great message, a fantastic message, the content, but if you deliver it in a poor way, it doesn't fly. So we'll introduce you to this term sticky, which means it's understood, it's remembered, and it changes attitudes and behaviors. Okay, and if you want to get on my schedule to talk about your team, please go ahead and click the calendar link. I put that into the chat today. And also tomorrow we'll send out an email with the links for the replay of this one, plus registration for the next one. Okay? All right. Oh, and if you want to know more about the Story War Academy, which all of these things come from, there's a link there. All right. And I'm hoping you're enjoying this discussion that we're having. We're sharing some really good things. And if we look at the folks that are registered for this call and that are out there, I know many of you, some of you are in America, some of you are in Africa, some in the Middle East and Asia. So it's good morning, good afternoon. And a lot of you are very seasoned salespeople and very good persuaders and great leaders. One of these days, we got to figure out how to pull from some of your experience as well. All right, let's go to the Q&A. So folks, look at the Q&A, and if you have a question about today, or you got a scenario in your own business world that you want to discuss as a group, feel free and put that down in the Q&A and we'll discuss it. We'll take a few minutes to do that right now. Okay. First question. I was always never talk about your competition. I hear that one a lot. Don't talk about the competition. You're only giving them free airtime. Well, you can do that without giving them free airtime by saying things like the other guys or with other solutions. Now, every once in a while, the client may say, I want to know how you compare to XYZ organization. Now, never badmouth the competition. So I came up with a thing called a differentiating statement, which is fantastic. A differentiating statement gives kudos to your competition, but also places you above them. What a differentiating statement says is, XYZ organization is very good at such and such, and you give them their space. And what we are best at, notice I'm contrasting, I'm anchoring from this side to this side, but what we are best with is such and such. So the differentiating statement, you're comparing your competition's good traits against your best traits, and you're doing it in such a way that you're not bad mouthing them. So that's one thing. All right, other questions? Okay. All right, the question was, when you are, I guess the question was a little confusion about the difference between contrast and differentiation. They're not so different that they are mutually exclusive of each other. There is a lot of overlap. When you're doing differentiating really well, you're also contrasting. So I wouldn't get too hung up on that. What I would remind you is differentiation means you're looking for the difference. Contrast is illustrating that difference and showing the world of your buyer with your product and the world of the buyer without your product. In fact, one of the techniques we'll talk about later is a thing called whiteboarding. It's being able on a napkin or on a whiteboard, say, I know we only have a short amount of time, but let me tell you, this is your world right now with your current solution. And in it, you're highlighting the pains that they're having. Well, what if you could have this, now you're drawing another picture with your solution, illustrating why it's better, illustrating differentiating features and contrasting benefits and how you improve it. Okay, I hope that answers that. All right, any other questions? All right, I think that's good. All right, so contrast. It's important to have contrast. Can you go overboard? Absolutely. You can go overboard with contrast. And here's a guy that went goat circus on it. This is a movie called Tommy Boy. When I was working in the supply chain world, this was required viewing with all of our sales guys. And here he is getting a little too into the contrast.
Is trying to say is that our new brake pads are really cool. You're not even gonna believe it. Like, let's say you're driving along the road with your family, and you're driving along, la la la, woo, and then all of a sudden there's a truck tire in the middle of the road, and you hit the brakes. Whoa, that was close. Now let's see what happens when you're driving with the other guy's brake pads. You're driving along, and all of a sudden the kids are yelling from the back seat, I gotta go to the bathroom, Daddy. Not now, damn it. Truck tire. I can't stop. Help! There's a cliff. And your family's screaming, oh my God, we're burning alive. No, I can't feel my legs. In comes a meat wagon. Woo, woo, woo. And the medic gets out and says, oh my God. New guy's in the corner puking his guts out. All because you want to save a couple extra pennies. And to me, it doesn't.
Get out. Now.
Sir.
Yes.
Do you validate?
Now.
All right. So thank you, folks, for being with us today. And one last thing, probably one of the best ways for you to find out how to contrast is by asking questions. Tell me about your world today. What is it you like about your current solution? What is it you don't like? What would you like to have? And listen. They're going to give you more information than you could ever dream of. And then you use that to help serve them. All right, guys, have a fantastic week and go out and be your best story.